Our Violet Ends, Chapter 45. Do you care to explain yourself? Juliet touched the quilt over her shoulders, pulling at its loose threads. Her gaze remained unfocused, turned in the direction of her balcony, gazing out at the gray afternoon. The rain had stopped. As the ground grew quiet, so too did the skies. Kai Jun Lee. Juliet closed her eyes. The use of her birth name had the opposite effect that her mother had likely intended. Lady Kai wanted her to realize the severity of the situation. Instead, Juliet felt as if her mother were addressing someone else, some false manifestation of the girl she was supposed to be. All this time her parents had let her be Juliet, let her be wild, impulsive. Now they wanted the unknown daughter again, but Juliet only knew how to be Juliet. Do you even know what happened out there? She whispered, in answer to her mother's question. This was the first time she had ever seen both of her parents in her bedroom at once. The first time they had closed the door on a party going on in the house, their attention fixated on her instead. Your precious nationalists mingling downstairs with champagne. They opened fire on a peaceful protest. Hundreds of people dead in an instant. Never mind the infections. Never mind that the madness could soon break out among the soldiers. The nationalists would put them in quarantine to prevent the spread of the insects, but Juliet doubted it mattered. The monsters would be working this very moment, quickly infecting as many as they could. Violence on both sides. That was how a city shrouded in blood would always be. You are hardly in a place to be lecturing right now, Lady Kai said evenly. Juliet tightened her hold on the quilt. The Scarlets had deposited her in her bedroom when they hauled her back to the Kai house, had sat her upon her bed and demanded she wait while her parents came to her. She was to remain idle, some prisoner under confinement in her own home. This was her place. This was the only place she had. It was a massacre, Mama, Juliet snapped, rocking to her feet. It goes against everything we stand for. What happened to loyalty? What happened to order? Her parents remained unbothered. The two of them could have been replaced by marble statues for all that it mattered to Juliet. We value order, family, loyalty, Lady Kai confirmed. But at the end of the day, we chose to value whatever ensures our survival. An image of Rosalind flashed in Juliet's head, then Kathleen. And what about the survival of those on the streets? Juliet asked. Each time she blinked, she saw them fall. She saw the bullets pierce their chests and cut through the crowds. Communists who threaten the fabric of society, her mother replied, her tone grave. White flowers who have been trying to snuff us out for generations. You wish for their lives to be saved? When Juliet turned away, unable to speak past the sour twist in her throat, her mother's gaze followed. There was little Lady Kai ever missed. Little that went past her appraisal and emerged untouched. Juliet knew this, and yet still she was surprised at her mother as she snagged her wrist. Juliet's finger splayed out against her overhead light. The yarn on her finger glowed white. They say you were found with Roma Montagov. Her mother's grip tightened. Again, I ask, do you care to explain yourself? Juliet's eyes went to her father, who had yet to say anything. His composure was placid. Juliet felt turned inside out. While he stood there occupying a space in her room, Juliet could sense everything. Her own inhale, exhale of breath, the electricity droning overhead, the static murmur of conversation outside the door. Her heart thrummed just beneath her rib cage. I have loved him so long that I do not remember him as a stranger, Juliet answered. I have loved him long before we were told to work together in spite of the hate between our families. I will love him long after you tear us apart, merely because you pick and choose when it is convenient to partake in the blood feud. Her mother released her wrist. Lady Kai thinned her lips, but there was otherwise no surprise. Why would there be? It was not difficult to guess why else Juliet would be running away with him. We listened to the modern age and never thought to control what you do, Lord Kai said then, finally choosing to speak. His words were a low rumble that gave everything in the room a telltale tremor. I see that was our mistake. Juliet choked out a laugh. Do you think any of this could have turned out better if you have kept me trapped in the house? Do you think I would have ever learned defiance if you have kept me in Shanghai all these years, educated only by Chinese scholars and their ancient teachings? Juliet slammed her hand against her vanity table, swiping off her brushes and her powders to the floor. But it wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. Her words were so bitter in her mouth that she could taste them. I would have ended up the same. You were all held up in the city strings, and perhaps you should first ask why we have a blood feud before asking why I defied it. Enough, Lord Kai boomed. No, Juliet screamed back. Her heart was pounding. If she had been in hyper-awareness of the room before, now she could hear nothing except her raging violent pulse. Do you hear what the people are saying? This execution of communists and white flowers, they're calling it the White Terror. A terror as if it is merely another madness that cannot be helped. It can be helped. We could stop it. Juliet took a deep breath, forcing herself to lower her volume. The more she yelled, the more her parents narrowed her eyes, and she feared that one more outburst from her would have them choose to stop listening. This wasn't over. She still had a chance to convince them otherwise. Both of you have always said that power lies with the people. Juliet tried keeping her voice steady. That the Scarlet Gang would have fallen apart if Baba had not made a membership a badge of pride with ordinary civilians. Now we let them die? Now we let the nationalists slaughter whoever is suspected of unionizing? The blood feud is about fairness, about power and loyalty splitting the city. We are equals. You wish to say, Lord Kai interrupted coldly, that you would rather we return to a time when the white flowers blew up our household? Juliet staggered back. Her chest squeezed and squeezed until she was sure there was no oxygen left in her lungs. That is not what I mean. She hardly knew what she meant. All she knew was that none of this was right. But we are above massacre. We are above a kill order. Her father had turned away, but her mother's gaze remained. What have I tried to teach you? Lady Kai whispered. Do you remember not? Power lies with the people, but loyalty is a fickle, ever-changing thing. Juliet swallowed hard. So this was the Scarlet Gang. They had said yes when the foreigners demanded an alliance, choosing capital over pride. They had said yes when the politicians demanded an alliance, choosing survival all over else. Who cared about values when the history books were being written? What did it matter if the history books rewrote everything in the end? I beg you, Juliet dropped to her knees. Call an end to the White Terror. Demand the nationalists cease. Demand the white flowers be held separate from the communists. We have no right to eradicate a populace. It is not fair. What do you know about fair? Juliet lost her balance, folding sideways and sprawling upon her carpet. She could count on one hand the number of times her father had raised her voice at her. He had shouted so loudly just then that it hardly seemed real. She was half convinced the sound had come from elsewhere. Even Lady Kai was blinking rapidly, her hand pressed to the neck of her kippah. Juliet recovered faster than her mother did. Everything you taught me, she said. She pulled herself upright, the loose fabric of her dress gathering around her knees. Everything about our unity, about our pride, I will not hear it. Juliet straightened to her full height. If you won't do anything, I will. Lord Kai looked at her again. It was either the electricity flickering at the very moment, or a light in her father's eyes dimming. His expression turned blank, as it did when he encountered an enemy, as it did when he was readying to torture for information. Her father, however, did not resort to violence. He only put his hands behind his back and let his volume sink into a steady quiet once more. You will not, he said. Give up this malarkey and remain heir to the Scarlet Gang. Remain heir to an empire that will be backing the country's rulers. Or leave us now and live in exile. Lady Kai swiveled toward him. Juliet's fists grew tighter and tighter, letting out all her dread so that it did not show on her face. Are you mad? Lady Kai hissed to her husband. Do not give such a choice. Ask her. Ask Juliet what she did to Tyler. Utter silence descended into the room. For a second, Juliet was experiencing that weightlessness right before free fall. her breath cold in her throat and her stomach upended. Then the significance of her father's words registered like a shock of ice water, as she was rooted once more in the thick threads of her carpeting. Suddenly his refusal to bring her on Scarlet planning made sense. Shutting her out of the nationalist meetings made sense. How long had her father known? How long had he known she was a traitor and kept her here anyway? Let her pretend that everything was normal. I killed him. Lady Kai reared back, her lips parting in shock. I shot him and his men, Juliet went on. I live with his blood on my hands. I made the choice to put Roma's life over his. Juliet watched her mother, the line of her brow furrowed and carved from stone. Juliet watched her father, his gaze as blank as ever. I suspected, when they said he was found with only one bullet wound, Lord Kai said. I suspected when all of his men went down with no struggle, which seemed odd, given the workers of the uprising were ruthless in their artillery spray. It was only after I received reports about Tyler challenging Roma Montagov to a duel that my suspicions seemed to have motive. Juliet slumped against the frame of her bed, her whole body collapsing against the footboard slat. She had nothing to say, no defense to give, because she was guilty to the very core. Oh, Juliet, Lady Kai said softly. It was hard to tell whether her mother was admonishing her or pitying her. Pity that came not out of sympathy, but out of abhorrence that she could be so thoughtless. I had no intention of punishing her, no intention of asking for an explanation when this was the daughter I raised. Lord Kai brushed at his long sleeve, smoothing out the wrinkles in his fabric. I wished to observe her, to see whether I could write a course, wherever she had strayed. Juliet is my heir, my blood. I wished to protect her above all else, even against Tyler, even against the Scarlets below us. Her father walked close then, and when Juliet continued staring at her feet, he grasped her jaw, bringing her gaze up firmly. But we punish traitors, he finished. His fingers were like steel. And if Juliet wishes to defect the White Flower's cause, then she may leave and die along with them. Lord Kai let go. His hands dropped to his sides, and without another word, he swept out of the bedroom. The door closed behind him with a subdued click that seemed incredulous with the promise he had made. He would not break it. Her father had never broken a promise in his life. Mama. Those two words came out like a sob, like that ragged screech for help in childhood when she had scraped her knee playing outside, summoning her mother to come comfort her. Why? Juliet demanded. Why do we hate them so much? Lady Kai turned away, shifting her attention to the mess on the floor, while her back to Juliet, picking up the brushes and powders. She remained quiet, as if she did not know what or who Juliet was talking about. There must have been a reason, Juliet continued, angrily swiping at the prickle in her eyes. The blood feud has raged on since the last century. What are we fighting for? Why do we kill one another in an never-ending cycle if we do not know what the original site was? Why must we remain enemies with the Montagovs when nobody remembers why? And yet, wasn't that the root of all hatred? Wasn't that what made it so vicious? There was never a reason, never a good one, never a fair one. Sometimes, Lady Kai said, setting the brushes back into the vanity. Hatred has no memory to feed off. It has grown strong enough to feed itself, and so long as we do not fight it, it will not bother us. It will not weaken us. Do you understand me? Of course Juliet understood. To fight hatred was to upset their way of living. To fight hatred was to deny their name and deny their legacy. Lady Kai dusted her hands, looking at Juliet's sullied carpet with a little more than a vague unsettlement in her eyes. When her gaze flicked over to Juliet herself, the expression turned to a deep, deep sadness. You know what you did, Kai Junli, her mother said. Do not try to convince me, for I am finished here until you remember yourself. Then Lady Kai exited the room too, each click of her heels reverberating tenfold in Juliet's ears. Juliet stood there in her lonesome, listening as the door was locked from the outside, unable to stop the sob that rose again in her throat. "I regret nothing!" Juliet screamed, making no move to follow the receding footsteps. She did not bother banging on her door, did not attempt to tire herself out. The only thing that followed her mother out was her voice. "I refuse to remember a falsehood! I defy you!" The footsteps faded entirely. Only then did Juliet crumple into a ball, squeezing herself as small as she could upon the carpet, and let herself cry, let herself rage and scream into her hands. For the city, for the dead, for the blood that ran in rivers on the streets, for this cursed family, for her cousins, for Roma. Juliet choked on her next sob. She thought she had killed the monster of Shanghai. She thought she was hunting new monsters, born of deviant science and greed. She was wrong. There was another monstrous entity in this city, worse than all the others, feeding on all the others, rotting this whole place from the inside out, and it would never die until it was starved. Would no one starve hatred? Would no one take it upon themselves to cut off its very source of nourishment? Enough. Juliet took a deep breath. A deep, shaky breath, forcing her tears to come to a staggering stop. When she wiped her eyes clear again, she looked around her room carefully, taking inventory of every item that had not been removed. "Enough," she whispered aloud. "That's enough." No matter how thoroughly her heart lay shattered, she would reassemble the parts, even only temporarily, even only to get through the next hour. Before she was the heir of Scarlet Gang, she was Juliet Kai. And Juliet Kai was not going to accept this. She was not going to lie down and let other people tell her what to do. Get up. Get up. Okay. Get up. She rose to her feet. Her fist tight upon her finger, the piece of string sat heavy, soaked with rain and dirt and who knew what else. Yet still it clung to her skin with admirable strength. They had cleared her bedroom, taken the pistol from under her pillow, the revolvers hiding with her clothes, and knives slotted in her bookshelves. The door was indeed locked, but she was not locked in. After all, there was still a balcony adjoined to her room. She could slide the glass aside and jump. She could circle the house and disrupt the party downstairs. Not without weapons, but she could run. Her father had meant it. Exile was an option. But what was the point? What was the point of running if she had no one to run with? If she had no one to go to? Roma was either already dead or soon to be placed in front of the Scarlet Bullet. Juliet was one girl. No power, no army, no means of enacting rescue. Juliet reached into her wardrobe, retrieving the shoebox sitting under her dresses. Her arms brushed the beads dangling from the fabric, and as the room chimed with a light musical tinkling, Juliet rocked back and sat down hard on the floor, her fingers braced on either side of the box. She pulled the lid open. It was as she had remembered, the items remaining the same. A poster, an old train ticket, and a grenade. The box had sat untouched for so long, a keepsake of knickknacks Juliet once pulled from the attic because the items looked too glamorous to rot among the broken lampshades and discarded bullet casings. She wondered if the Scarlets had not removed this from her room because they had not thought to open the box, or if it was so absurd to think that she would use a grenade to do damage that they did not bother. Juliet closed her palm around it. To her left, the reflection in the vanity mimicked her movements, the glass capturing her fretful expression when she glanced up. "How would the war proceed if I killed them right now?" Juliet asked, speaking to herself, to the mirror, to the city itself as it ground to a halt, this cold, hollow room. They mingle beneath me, prominent nationalists and war generals. Maybe Chiang Kai-shek himself had stepped in. I would be a hero. I would save lives. A burst of laughter echoed up from the floorboards. Glasses clinked together, toasts given to celebrate mass slaughter. The blood feud had been bad enough, but it was something Juliet believed she could change. Now it had grown to unrecognizable proportions, split bigger than it ever needed to be. Scarlet against White Flower, nationalist against communist. Dissolving a blood feud was one thing, but civil war? She was too small, far too small, to meddle with a war that spanned across the country, that spanned across their whole forsaken history as a nation. Another burst of laughter, louder this time. Let her drop an explosive to her bedroom floor, and it would send down a direct blast, strike all the people in her living room. Juliet felt the rush of loathing take root in her. She condemned the city for its hate. She condemned her parents, her gang, but she was equally terrible. One final act of violence to end it all. She was angry enough to do it. No more Scarlet Legacy, no more Scarlet Gang. If she was dead too, she didn't need to live with the pain of her terrible act, herself and her parents, in exchange for bringing down everyone else in the house. Let the city weep, she hissed. We are past hope, past cure, past help. She pulled the pin. Juliet! Juliet whirled around, her hand tight around her grenade. For a fleeting second she thought it was Roma on her balcony, perching on the railing once again. Then her vision sharpened, and she realized her ears were playing tricks on her, for it was not Roma sliding open her glass doors, but Benedict. What are you doing? Benedict hissed, striding in. Juliet, on instinct, took a step back. What are you doing here? She demanded. You have to go. Why, so you can blow yourself up? Benedict asked. Roma is still alive. I need your help. The rush of relief almost caused Juliet to drop the grenade, but she tightened her hold just in time, keeping the lever pressed down. Then she opened her eyes, overwhelmed by the sheer knowledge of this one thing that the universe had granted her. She was so grateful that tears sprang up immediately. I'm glad you evaded capture, Juliet said, her voice quiet. Of all people, you would be able to get him out. Oh, please. Juliet's eyes snapped open, so shocked by Benedict's tone that her tears receded. He pointed at the grenade in your hand. Do you think that's worth it? What will it do to blow up a few communists? They will build their ranks again. They will pick a new leader from Beijing, from Wuhan, from wherever else there are people. The war will be fought, still. The conflict will go on. I have a duty here, Juliet managed shakily. If I can do one thing... You want to do one thing? Benedict asked. Let's go blow up the monsters. Let's stop Dimitri, but this? He jammed a thumb in the direction of her door. The sounds of the party outside continued to filter through. This is inevitable, Juliet. This is civil war, and you cannot disrupt it. Juliet did not know what to say. She closed both hands around the grenade and stared at it. Benedict let her stand like that for a long moment, let her roil in her conflicting emotions, before turning on his heel, and cursing under his breath, muttering, First Marshall, then you. Everyone is just dying to self-sacrifice themselves. Marshall? Benedict grinned, as if remembering that he had broken into enemy ground. He wandered out into the balcony again and peered around, watching for movement. Dimitri intercepted the Scarlets and took Roma and Elisa. Marshall got looped in too when he was trying to rescue them. Now it's just you and me. We really do not have long, Juliet. Has Dimitri recruited the workers? Juliet asked, her heart pounding in her ears. Yes, Benedict confirmed. At this point, I don't know if Dimitri is still intent on taking the White Flowers. With just about every gangster either dead or imprisoned, or having fled the city, he's far more concerned with building a base of power among the communists. Then why did he take Roma, if not to end the Montegov line? It's symbolic, I suspect. Kill the gangsters, kill the imperialists, kill foreign influence in the city. A public execution as a last-ditch war cry for the workers in the city before nationalists stomp them out. And then Dimitri and his monsters will flee south with the rest of the communists, and the war will rage on. Juliet sucked in a ragged inhale. Was that how this would end? Lorenz could sneak a vaccine into the city's water supply, but the whole country? The whole world? If Dimitri fled with the communists high off the power that his acquired arms and money and monsters gave him, what was the limit? Where would it stop? Look, Benedict said, cutting into Juliet's panic, his voice floating in from the balcony. Either way, I think we can rescue them. Roma, Marshall, and Elisa. We can get them away from Dimitri and leave the city for good, but you need to help me. The immediate agreement was on her tongue. and yet Juliet was also having trouble making the move to go. We punish traitors, and if Juliet wishes to defect the White Flower's cause, then she may die along with them. It wasn't a new development. She had turned traitor 5 years ago, that windy day on the Bund when she befriended Roma Montagov. She had turned traitor all those times refusing to push her knife into him. She had turned traitor long before she put her bullet in her own cousin, because if loyalty meant being cruel to a fault, then she could not do it. Her parents would mourn. They would be mourning a version of her that did not exist. "I love you both so much," she murmured. "But you are killing me." Benedict's head popped back from the room. "What was that?" "Nothing," Juliet said, snapping in action. "I'll come." "Oh!" Benedict almost seemed surprised by Juliet's turn and attitude. He eyed her as she eyed her room, allowing herself one last look around. "You're still holding, Juliet reached for the pin and slid it back into the grenade. Gently, she returned the weapon into her shoebox and tucked it into her wardrobe once more. Before she closed the doors again, she pulled out one of her flapper dresses. "Let me change first. I'll be fast." Benedict frowned as if to advise against such a flashy choice, but then Juliet pulled out a coat too. Her brow raised in challenge, and Benedict nodded. "I'll wait on the balcony." Enough time had passed for Juliet's hair to dry, but it had been a downpour outside, and her clothes were still sticking to her. In an effort to yank off her dress, she seemed to might have yanked a bit too hard, because as she shed it, there came a plink of something hitting the carpet. Had she broken off a button? A sequin? She squinted at the floor. No, it was something blue. It was a small pill, its color as shiny as a gem. Beside it lay a slip of paper, slightly damp as it fluttered to a stop. "Oh my God," Juliet muttered, unfolding the note. Vaitas's hand on her back. The quick swipe against her when he removed it. He had put these items into her pocket. Use wisely. Lawrence. Vaitasa was an undercover White Flower. A disbelieving laugh burst through her throat, but Juliet choked it down fast, not wanting to concern Benedict, who already seemed to think she was a moment away from leaping off the deep end. Juliet picked up the pill, examining it carefully. When she slipped it into her new dress, she put it snugly into her new pocket, dry and clean. Then transferred over the rest of what had not fallen out. Her little lighter, a single hairpin, that was all. She had no weapons, no valuables, nothing save the clothes on her back, and a warm coat tightened around her waist in a sash. She hurried to the balcony. When Benedict turned around, his hair was ruffling in the wind, expression earnest in such resemblance to Roma that it hurt her chest to look at him. "Let's go."